Chapter 16. Dorinda cleaned, but first she phoned. She couldn't leave Roderick on his own. Against the Duquesnes. When he didn't answer a second time, she tried Charlie at the police station. No response there either. Fortunately, Eugene was listed in the phone book. Aunt Letty picked up. "Dorinda, dear. How nice to hear from you." Dorinda cut the chit-chat short and relayed her grim discovery. "Coyotes," Aunt Letty said. "Oh my. That would explain why they're not in the registry. I came to the same conclusion. Given the trouble your family's been having, I felt Roderick needs to know. Can't you tell him yourself? You are still protecting him, aren't you?" "Not exactly. Something came up. I had to go back to the shop. Big Alex left a patrol in the yard. Roderick should be safe." Dorinda heard snuffling over the line, as if Aunt Letty were trying to gauge her scent through fiber optic cable. "Did something happen between you and Roddy, dear? Is he being a hound to you again?" "It's nothing I can't handle. Don't worry about it. You have to understand, dear. The Chases are an old-blooded line. We can get a bit rigid in our thinking, especially where other species are concerned. Roddy's being boorish. Emma has a phrase for it. Rip him a new one." "I'll be fine," Dorinda said, grinning into the phone. "Don't put yourself out. Just get the world to him as soon as you can, okay?" "Of course I will, dear. This is serious. I can't believe Ellis would be so deceptive. Daddy's not going to like this." To say nothing of the Duquesnes' reaction. Once news of Coraline's pedigree leaked, that would end the wedding plans and any further reason to keep Roderick alive. "I tried calling Charlie, but he wasn't in. Can you get hold of him too? Let him know. Roderick may need police protection." "Nonsense. You're all Roddy needs. He likes you, dear, and so do I. So does the rest of the family. I hope you can get back to him soon. I've never seen him so relaxed and thoughtful toward someone who wasn't a wolf." "Relaxed, right? Thoughtful, sure. Too bad magic couldn't fix everything," Dorinda thought as she hung up the phone. She'd done all she could. Roderick's family would help him deal with the Duquesne situation. She'd deal with the rest on her own. It wasn't a satisfactory solution, but right or wrong, it was the best she could come up with. She was able to put troubling thoughts aside for a time while she and Perry repaired the damage done to set a spell. Fortunately, most of it was cosmetic. They'd lost some jars of herbs and a badger skull when one of the shelves toppled over, but that was the worst of it. "Why did we have a badger skull again?" Perry asked. "Ambience, mostly. There's some kind of spell you can use it for, but I can't remember what just now. I'm more concerned about these candles. We can't sell these as is. The holders are all dented. Look." Perry turned one over in her hands and fingered the dimple in the metal. "Half price sale. We'll have to." "I know. We can tell customers a poltergeist invaded the store and wrecked our inventory. We can have a store-wide event. Make a day of it. Sounds like fun. Better than having to tell people the place got trashed by a jealous werewolf." She broke off. It didn't matter that Dorinda had her back to the door. She didn't need to see the alarm creeping over Perry's face or hear Springsteen's hiss from the windowsill. She knew who just opened the door and made the bell go off. She knew whose harsh panting that was and whose yellow eyes were boring into the back of her neck. "Are you all right?" Roderick said to Dorinda's back. Slowly she turned round to face him. Thank Hecate he'd gotten dressed before barging back into her life. If you wanted to count that slapdash effort as dressed, she thought. His shirt tail hung out and his belt flapped loose and his jacket hung half off his shoulders. He had a faint smear of blood on his chin and a few gray hairs around his mouth that might have come from a squirrel. His eyes locked onto hers. What she saw in them dried up any smart remark she might have been tempted to make. "I came as soon as I heard," he plunged on. "Did she hurt you?" Dorinda mutely shook her head. Perry, in spite of her obvious interest, picked discretion and quietly slipped into the back. Springsteen followed suit, an orange blur that went from sill to storage room in record time. Dorinda's brain barely registered either retreat. "Nothing happened," she managed at last. "She came to warn me off you. Things got ugly. Springsteen took care of her. Called you, but you wouldn't pick up. I was out." He wiped the blood and squirrel hairs off his face with the back of his hand. "Where is she now?" "Either jail or the pound, I'm not sure. Depends on the shape she was in. You'll have to talk to Charlie." She could sense his heartbeat, fast and loud, pounding in perfect rhythm with hers. The ragged concern in his voice touched her at her core. If only she could forget this morning, everything would be fine. Did you talk to Charlie? Aunt Letty. She said you'd been attacked by Coraline, then blathered something about coyotes and ripping me a new one. A new what? Oh, never mind. You've got to come back to Meadowlands. Obviously you're still in danger. I'm not coming back. I quit and you know why. I apologized for that. I was being a dog. I know. She carefully set the dented candles back on the shelf, careful also not to look directly at him. My word is important to me. I can't work for someone who takes that lightly. Or expects me to. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I can take care of myself. You've got Big Alex's muscle. You don't need a bodyguard. Now I'm going to have to ask you to leave. He planted himself in front of the door. Not without you. Yes. Without me. She raised her hand. She couldn't open the door because he was blocking it, but she could give him a warning nudge. Don't make me throw you into a wall again. Throw me around all you like. I'm not leaving without you, and that's that. Damn stubborn wolf. I'm not coming back to work for you. Yes, you are. If you won't agree, I'll simply stand here and howl until you do. That'll bring in the cops, of which Charlie is one. And let your enemies know where you are. Maybe even bring them down on you. We're certain to catch them then, aren't we? Stop saying we. No. We're still a team. Don't try to tell me quitting counts. You swore to protect me. You gave your word. You made a promise to me and you broke it. Isn't that in violation of the witch's creed or something? You know damn well why I left. Yes. He thrust his hands into his pockets. I'm sorry. I'm racist and speciesist and several kinds of a git. You're not a monkey or an ape or a baboon or any form of the word simian. You're human and a witch, and I mean both in only the most complimentary terms. Is this sufficient, or must I beg? That isn't necessary. But Roderick had already gotten down on the floor. He lay on his back and tugged his shirt out of his waistband, baring his belly in werewolf submission. Horrified, Dorinda ran to him. Don't. For goddess's sake, get up. What if somebody sees you like that? Perry, for instance. The badly muffled chortles from the back told Dorinda she could abandon that hope. She hauled on Roderick's arms and got him into a sitting position. I accept your apology. You big stupid mutt. Now cut it out. Are you coming back to Meadowlands? No. I can't. It wouldn't be right. What, because of our bedroom scene? I apologize for how it ended. Not for how it began. I wasn't the one who started things, remember? Perry gasped. Dorinda shushed him frantically. Look. She lowered her voice. What happened between us? Well, it shouldn't have. That was my fault. I made a mistake. You are virgin. This time Perry snorted loudly. Roderick looked around. Is that bloody cat back there? Yes, and I'll sick him on you if you don't leave right now. Inwardly, Dorinda vowed to smack Perry's pixie butt just as soon as she got rid of Roderick, which should never get involved with her employer. It's a violation of oaths. An ethical thing. There's no such oath. You're making this up as you go. That doesn't matter. Neither did her arguments, she realized. He was determined to outstubborn her. Werewolves were masters at that. If I come back with you to Meadowlands, it will be as your bodyguard. Nothing else. No touche, no baby. Are we clear? As glass. His objective achieved, Roderick got up smoothly. He tucked his shirt back in and meticulously straightened his jacket. I won't lay so much as a finger on you. Only don't expect me to restrain myself if you make the first move again. Perry guffawed. Dorinda gritted her teeth. I need to get my bag. Good. I hope you have your car. One of the guards dropped me off. Perry scooted out of the way when Dorinda charged into the office. She had a chokehold on Springsteen, who struggled for air in her grip. Dorinda grabbed her shoulder bag and crammed some emergency herbs and powders into it. So, how did it go? Perry said innocently. I don't want to hear one word out of you. Not one word. Perry stifled a giggle. Want me to save you some ice cream? Dorinda glowered. She snatched up a soft pretzel and ripped off a bite like she was tearing out somebody's throat. No ice cream for you, Perry said. Roderick declined her offer of soft pretzel, so Dorinda finished off the Hapless snack in the car. So what happens with Coraline now? I really don't care. That's done. I never wanted to marry her anyway. Far too high-strung. Not to mention smelly. That was fast. I only just talked to Letty less than an hour ago. What do you mean? You breaking the engagement? How did you even get hold of her? Figured she'd be in police custody by now. Not today. Last night. I assumed that's why she attacked you. I phoned Lupin Hill last night while you were setting up your magics to bar me from your room. His lip curled minutely. Coraline wasn't in, so I talked to her father. Let him know the match was unacceptable. Then of course I had to call home before he could. His mouth tightened in a chilly smile. Mother was rather put out. Last night. Dorinda's memory hit rewind. All that snarling and howling over the phone. It explained the murderous expression in his eyes when he'd come charging out of the kitchen. So that's why he asked how she'd feel about him. If he were free of his promise. Sweet Hecate. He'd done it. Refused the match, defied his alpha, risked expulsion from his pack. She swallowed painfully down a throat suddenly. Restricted to a microscopic slit. You didn't tell me. Of course I told you. Several times. I told you the engagement was off. You weren't in any mood to listen. Dorinda replayed the disastrous morning. Somewhere in there she vaguely recalled Roderick mentioning he was done with Coraline. The true meaning hadn't sunk in. Or more likely, she'd been so caught up in her own self-righteousness, her determination to preserve her independence, that she hadn't let his revelation register. All this was last night? I believe I just said that. Watch out for that truck. She'd been looking at him and not the road. The truck blared its horn. Dorinda swerved. They missed each other by about 6 inches, a wide margin by city standards. Roderick swore colorfully and were sorry, Dorinda said. Are you sure you're not trying to kill me? Sorry, she repeated. He could have no idea how sorry she was about so many things. Are you going to be all right? With your mother in your pack, I mean. What else was I to do? You made it plain you wouldn't have me unless I were free and clear. I certainly had no desire to bind myself to Coraline. Anxious. Smelly bitch. He shuddered all over, like a dog shaking water from its coat. Mother picked that out for me? She can go hang. Then Letty didn't tell you? Tell me what? That Coraline attacked you? Yes, I got that part. I mean the rest of it. He looked at her blankly. Dorinda exited onto the Schuylkill Expressway and merged with the rest of the traffic. It would be easier to drive around the city to Fairmount Park than through it. I guess it doesn't matter now since the wedding's off, but it might have a bearing on all these attacks. As about Coraline and the coyotes. He didn't take it well. He howled. He raged. Dorinda thought he'd rip through his seatbelt, so badly did he want to tear into something. Passing drivers glanced their way, then gave Dorinda's car as wide a berth as traffic patterns would allow. Roderick demanded Dorinda drive him at once to Lupin Hill. Ellis Duquesne merited an immediate thrashing for his duplicity. Where in Lycaon's name do you think you're going? He roared when Dorinda made the turn for Meadowlands. Instead, I'm taking you home, she said calmly. Stop and think a minute. Ellis knows. He tried to pull a fast one on your family. By now he's probably had to withstand a verbal assault from your mother. His brother's still on the critical list and his daughter's just been arrested. He won't be in the best of moods. You go charging in there all self-righteous and he's liable to hand you your tail. Not to mention Alfie's still out there. As far as we know, you're still on the hit list. I'm just doing my job here. Exactly what you hired me for. You're too bloody efficient, that's what you are, Roderick growled. I touched Albert, Dorinda said. I got only truth from him. Of course he'd know all about Coraline. Why didn't this come out? Because her being half coyote didn't pose a threat to the family, she answered her own question. They'd pawned her off on you. Problem solved. His uppermost concern was keeping Ellis safe. That's all he thought about. He should have thought of himself more. Maybe then he wouldn't have gotten shot. Dorinda frowned. Albert shooting through a spanner into every one of her theories. I don't think the danger's over yet, she said slowly. There's more going on than we know. She pulled the car up to the house. No wolves tracked their arrival or answered Roderick's questioning bark. He motioned for Dorinda to stay in the car while he sniffed the air. That's odd. Looks like we've been abandoned.
Dorinda klottet her shoulderbag.
You think something happened to them? Or they happened to someone? Roderick cupped his hands around his mouth and howled. Almost immediately, off to the north they picked up a distant response. Ah, Roderick said. Coyote assault. The boys are showing them what for. Dorinda climbed warily out of the car. Something didn't feel right here. The vibes were off. Alarms jangled along her nerves like a bat itch. She laid her hand on Roderick's forearm. Let me go in first. One touch to the doorknob alerted her. She jerked her hand back as if bitten. Somebody's inside, she said. Someone who doesn't belong. Then he'd better get out. Roderick shouldered past her and charged into the house. Dorinda tried to stop him with a grab at his jacket, but missed. Damn.
Territorial wolf.
She bolted within. Roderick had stopped in the parlor. He stood, sniffed, snarled and headed for the stairs. This time Dorinda snagged his arm. Together, she said. He smiled down at her. Absolutely. They ascended a step at a time, both alert for danger. As it turned out, they had no need for caution. The intruder wasn't going anywhere. He tried to enter Roderick's bedroom. Whatever charms he might have on him clearly hadn't worked. He hung suspended in the net of the wards like a bug in a spider's web. His face was slack, his gold eyes glazed. When Roderick and Dorinda topped the stairs, he couldn't even muster a growl. Dorinda peered at him from a safe distance. He had blondish brown hair and a sharp nose atop a naked body scrawny as a stick. His features looked vaguely familiar to her, but she was sure she didn't recognize him. Roderick's nose did. He strode to the doorway and closed his hand around their captive's neck. The smile on his face and the snarl in his voice both sent chills down her back. Alfie, old boy. How wonderful to see you again. Chapter 17. Dorinda and Roderick stood by the door and studied the coyote on the bed. The coyote glared back. Diversion, Dorinda said. Your friends lure Big Alex's guards away while you break into the house. I'll bet you got in through the doggy door. I knew I should have put a ward on that. Alfie didn't say anything. His thin gold eyes marked the door and every one of the windows. No need to bind him, since with the wards in place he couldn't get out of the room. Dorinda had provided him with a towel, which he'd wrapped around his middle on her orders. She might have to question him, perhaps even spell him, but she didn't have to look at him naked. She wondered if binding might work better on Roderick, whose non-stop growl announced he was only seconds from ripping their captive to pieces. All right, she thought, work with that. You'd better talk, she told Alfie. Otherwise he'll kill you. And what'll that get you? Alfie sneered. I die, you learn scat, and the hunt goes on regardless. Face it, chickie, you need me alive. But not necessarily whole. Roderick started forward. Dorinda held out her arm, stopping him. You'll talk, she told the coyote. One way or another. She reached for him. He was too cool, too self-assured. He didn't move or try to bite when she touched her hand to his forehead. The touch barely lasted a second. She snatched her hand back with a startled yell. Her fingers felt as if she'd dipped them in acid. A bit of smoke curled from their tips. Roderick lunged at the smirking coyote. A powerful blow sent Alfie sprawling atop the coverlet. What did I just tell you? Don't. He didn't bite me. Dorinda blew on her fingers. They stung, but the pain was fading. He's got a hex on him. Some kind of mystic shield. It won't let me touch him. Can you read him without touching him? She shook her head. Not deep enough to get anything useful. Well then, since obviously I can touch him, we'll just have to do this my way. He seized the groggy Alfie by the scruff of the neck. Which bits would you like to lose first? Wait, we can still do this my way. We just need to take stronger measures. She rooted around in her bag. Alfie watched with growing apprehension. Last chance, she said to him. Who are you working for? Who ordered Roderick killed? Bite me, chickie. And your little dog too. At least tell me which magician you're working with. I have my own scores to settle. Sure, why not? You magic monkeys want to waste each other, what's that to us? He shook himself out of Roderick's grip and rubbed the back of his neck. We been going to witches all over Philly. Over in Jersey even. Spell here. A spell there. No pattern, no trail. Never the same witch twice. She'd guessed as much. No dark magic? He shrugged one shoulder. Too expensive. And they want too much in exchange. Like your fingers or your soul or whatever. Like the witches are any better. Won't even sell you a knife. What's it for? What do you want the charm to do? You swear you won't hurt anybody. Chaos bite my tail, you gotta jump through. Oops. They got this stupid oath thing. Du noir. Even when you offer 'em money. Who the scat stands by their word in this day and age? Roderick slanted a wry look at Dorinda. You'd be amazed. Same with the monkey muscle. We pay 'em, we use 'em, we send 'em on there. Way. Don't bother looking for 'em 'cause you won't find any. Sorry if I can't. Be more of a help. All dead ends then, Roderick said. Except for you. And you ain't getting scat out of me. We'll see, Dorinda said. She set her shoulder bag on the dresser and began to pull vials and drawstring. Packets out of it. The smug seeped out of Alfie's face. Hey, that better not be poison. I got rights. Don't worry. I'm brewing a truth potion. One good sniff and you'll tell me everything and be happy to do it. She smiled. I would have gotten far less with the touch, but you had to insist on the hard way. Hey, wait a minute. Too late. Dorinda took a small clay bowl from her bag and poured the contents of a vial into it. Green liquid pooled in the bowl. Into this she sprinkled ground herbs from a pouch. A soft, smoky mist arose from the bowl, thick with the smell of mint. You'd better wait in the hall, she told Roderick. This can have a powerful effect on people with sensitive noses. She beamed evilly at Alfie. Just imagine what it can do to a whir. His imagination was working just fine. She could tell from his worried posture. And the way he flinched from the bowl. She swirled the liquid in the bowl and its steamy billow increased. Anyone other than the spellcaster who caught a whiff of it would be compelled to speak the truth. She extended the bowl toward Alfie and watched his eyes glaze over. And only then became aware of Roderick hovering far too closely over her shoulder. I said wait in the hall. This stuff's dangerous. And leave you alone in the room with that? He thrust his chin at Alfie. His voice slurred over the consonants, and his eyes didn't seem to be focusing. He'd kill you the second I turned my back. Fine mate I'd be if I allowed that to happen. Whoa. She's your mate, Alfie said in the same fuzzy voice. Dog, your pack standards have fallen. Roderick, Dorinda said, please wait in the hall. I'll be all right. He can't. Roderick shouldered her aside to confront Alfie. You will not speak in that tone to my mate. Holy scat, dog. She's not even shifter. Don't you teabags have rules against messing with the lower orders or something? Bugger the rules. Bugger the pack. I never even wanted control of the pack to begin with. Bloody treacherous low-rankers fawning all over you right before they go for your throat. Rip out your guts soon as look at you. Forget the upper ranks. He snarled. Lift your leg too high and it's taken for threat. You can't relax for a second. And this is your family. Think what outsiders are like. Dog, that's rough. This trip is the first chance I've had to breathe in years. You are so fortunate, he said to Dorinda. Free to be whatever you want. Mate with whomever you please. I love this country. I'm touched. She tried to steer him toward the door and away from the misty cloud hovering over the bed. Roderick, please. I always wanted to be a cowboy, he said dreamily. Out in the wide open spaces with no damned pack trailing after you. Like that Eastwood fellow. He's one of us, you know. A wolf. If he isn't, he bloody well should be. No way, Alfie said. He's a coyote. Gotta be. He's got a sense of humor. No. Wolf on the planet has a sense of humor. That's why you mutts are doomed. This is all fascinating, Dorinda said, tugging at Roderick's arm. However, it would never work, Roderick said. The cowboy thing. Horses don't like me. The predator-prey dynamic. His wistful smile disappeared, and he seized Dorinda's shoulders. You like me, don't you? I wouldn't blame you if you hated me. You've put your life on hold and yourself at risk to protect me, and I've been such a perfect brute. What's the Yank word? Puts. Alfie suggested. I was going to say ass, but I suppose yours works. Dorinda, you're a lovely, brave, patient woman who's been kinder to me than I deserve. Eva. Never met a wolf I wanted to stand at my side more than generated by ABC.
amberlit.rt
http://www.processtext.com/upclit html http://www.processtext.com/upclit html. You. Roderick, you don't know what you're saying. The hell I don't. I'm in love with you. Whoa dog, Alfie said. Dorinda got as far as Rod, before his mouth closed over hers and smothered all objections. She couldn't stop her own response. She'd been attuned to him from the beginning, and the emotions that flooded her now through the contact washed away any objections. The female in her surrendered to instinct and rose up to match the male. The cards never lied. This arrogant, overbearing meat-eating wolf was her perfect mate. But not here, not now, not under these circumstances. Reluctantly she broke the kiss. We'll talk about this later, she promised him. I get her when you're done, Alfie said. Roderick snarled and Alfie recoiled. Hey, just asking. Dorinda turned Roderick's head to face her. Do you really love me? Of course I love you. You're the only she I want. Would you do something for me? Anything, darling. Open that window, stick your head out and take deep breaths. He looked puzzled but did as she asked. Maybe she hoped the fresh air would clear his head. While Roderick cleaned the truth mist out of his nose, Dorinda turned to Alfie. Now, down to business. Who hired you to kill Roderick? Alfie opened his mouth, shut it, ground his teeth. His whole body writhed as if he sat on an electrical grid and not Aunt Letty's down coverlet. Dorinda frowned. The truth spell shouldn't work this way. Either the influx of fresh air or the hex he carried must offer him a measure of resistance. Who hired you to kill Roderick? She persisted. He shrugged apologetically. Can't do it, chickie. It's family. Which family? The Duquesnes. He started to nod but caught himself. We already know about their coyote blood, Dorinda said. Technically you're not betraying anyone. You don't know this dog. He's bloodthirsty. Him and the other one. The both of them could kill me and not give a scat. I'd rather take my chances with you. You're tough but you're no killer. But I am. Roderick turned from the window. His eyes had cleared. He avoided aiming them at Dorinda. Who's the other one? A human. Wolf. Pure blood. The two of them been working together. He clamped his mouth shut again. Someone close. Dorinda glanced at Roderick. He still wouldn't look at her. We need names, she said. Start with the wolf if that's easier for you. Is it someone we know? A member of Roderick's pack. Alfie shuddered all over. Then abruptly Alfie was gone. A scrawny coyote crouched on the bed with a towel draped over his hindquarters. His gold eyes darted back and forth between the two of them. His tail was tucked firmly to his belly. As if that's going to help you, Roderick snarled. Actually it does, Dorinda said. He can't talk in that form. He can bark. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Yes, there's that. She took a step toward the coyote. Okay, we'll just go down the list. Who ordered this? Was it Ellis Duquesne? Alfie uttered 2 barks, the second clipped. He whined and shrank away from her. Roderick loomed on his other side. Was it Bernadette Chase? Wait a minute, Dorinda thought. He's not cringing. He's gathering himself. Alfie sprang off the bed like a shot and leaped out the open window. The wards caught him briefly, but his momentum and the conflicting magics laid on him weakened their efforts. The wards snapped, spilling Alfie onto the ground too. Stories below. Dorinda darted to the window in time to see Alfie climb groggily to his feet, shake himself and stumble off through the garden, gathering speed as he moved. Crap, she said. She found herself addressing his jacket, pooled on the floor by the door. Kitchen just as the doggy door swung shut. A lot of ground. He'd found a thin track through the trees around Meadowlands. Roderick's hunting howl wasn't too far off the mark. Magnetized to Roderick, their heartbeats thudded in unison. His thoughts guide the pack, he'd explained to her once. Souls were determined to unite? She had a better idea of where the trail was headed. If it stayed straight, go from there. Any populated area would work for him since he could pass for. She heard yelps from up ahead. Roderick had caught up with him. Then a scream. And the shriek of brakes and a hideous thump, followed by nothing. Frozen at the curb. Up and down the drive cars came to sudden screeching. Stops. A Camaro straddled the center line off to her right, trailing glass. It ran right in front of me, the Camaro's driver wailed to the other stopped. Cover this. Does anybody know? Among the deadlocked traffic, Dorinda spotted a police car. The officer strode purposefully toward the Camaro. She sank her hand into the thick fur of Roderick's ruff and tugged gently. Unnoticed, they slipped away. Chapter 18. That's it then, Roderick said. Our only lead, a dead end, so to speak. Dorinda peered into her teacup. Roderick had a bracing mug of broth. Pawn. Their return to the Meadowlands kitchen, he had pulled on his slacks, but remained shirtless and shoeless. She absently rubbed a scratch on her cheek, where a twig had protested her blunder through the trees. We've made some progress, she pointed out. We've eliminated Ellis Duquesne from the suspect list. We might as well eliminate Coraline. She had her reasons for wanting to marry you, and they included keeping you alive. I wouldn't have wished that fate on Alfie, but with him gone the attacks may stop. Doubtful. He gave the impression they'd keep coming no matter how many coyotes we went through. He batted his mug between his hands, like a cat with a ball of yarn. Eva. Only one move left. Return to England. She looked up. Dismay pierced her sharply. You can't. Why not? My only reason for being here was to marry Coraline, and that's off. Unless you can think of a good reason for me to stay. Yes, I can. You heard Alfie. There are 2 of them after you, and one is a full-blood wolf. The card said the killer was someone close to you. We've eliminated all the wolves you know in Philadelphia. The only ones left are your immediate family. If you go home now, you'll be walking right into a death trap. All the more reason to take the fight to them. Go for the throat. It's what we Chases are best at. I can't let you do that. Alfie never gave us a gender. It could be any one of them. Your mother, your siblings, who knows how many other relatives you've got. I won't let you throw your life away in some foolish frontal assault. You don't even know who the enemy is. It won't come to that if you're with me. We need some kind of what? Come with me. Best we present a united front. Make them think twice about strike. She blinked, unsure she'd heard him right. You mean to England? Right through the front door of Chase Manor. That's sure to provoke an attack. His canines showed. Then we've got them. Dorinda put her head in her hands. Please don't do this to me. It's been too long of a day. I don't see any problem. You're my bodyguard as well as my mate. You belong at my side. I'm not your mate. You could be. You need merely say yes. Did I propose? I'm not entirely sure. That doesn't count. You were under a spell. A truth spell. I meant every word of what I said up there. Even the bit about being a cowboy? Don't get off the subject. You want me. Why else would you still be here? Because I'm an idiot, she thought. Aloud she said. I swore to keep you safe. I intend to honor that regardless of my personal feelings. Your reading promised me love and happiness. When do I get that? He leaned across the table. And from whom? Not from me, she said too quickly. We barely know each other. I was ready to marry a woman I'd never met. At least I like you most of the time. Way to flatter a girl, Mr. Romance. No. I might consider a trip to England in order to solve this case. I might even consider going to bed with you now, if only to get you off my back. But I won't be your mate. I'm a witch, you're a werewolf. It would never work. I don't see any reason why not. I can see plenty. I'm a vegetarian for starters. He shrugged. We all have our little faults. And you're a pompous jerk. He shrugged again. You're snooty and repressed. I am not. You most certainly are. All that yapping about oaths and vows is just a smokescreen, an excuse to avoid involving yourself with the inferior masses. Witches aren't solitary by nature. They're snobs. That is so not true. I beg to differ. You can lie to yourself or even to me, but not to this. He tapped his nose. I annoy you and upset you. I have from the first. Yet here you sit. I also frighten you, in a way you've shown with no other wolf. What is it about me personally that frightens you so? I'm not afraid of you, she snarled, and to prove it lunged across the table, grabbed him by the hair, and dragged his mouth onto hers. She poured everything she had into the kiss. She was going to show this puffed up son of a werebitch the price of insulting a witch. She thrust her tongue inside his mouth without asking permission. Submit to this dog boy, she thought. He did. His mouth relaxed against hers and he all too willingly accepted everything she could dish out. This definitely wasn't going according to plan, but she'd committed to it now and wouldn't break it off. The kiss went on and on. Dorinda lost track of the seconds. At some point she surrendered to his return assault on her tongue without even a whimper of protest. The taste of him thrilled her, like the savor of forbidden sin. When the air finally ran out and they broke apart, Dorinda had all but lost track of where she was. She was surprised to find her upper half sprawled across Letty's kitchen table with Roderick's hands fisted in her hair. He grinned into her eyes, completely unrepentant. Smug, beautiful jerk. She tried to wriggle back onto her chair, but he caught her by the shoulders and wouldn't let her escape. I believe you mentioned sleeping with me earlier, he said. Yes, I did, didn't I? Now that he was no longer promised to Coraline, the prospect held appeal. Quite a bit of appeal. Why not indulge herself just this once? She'd put up with him for days. She deserved something. All right. I'll go to bed with you. Not good enough. What? I want more than an empty romp from you. I want what I was promised. Love and happiness. You're not the only one who wants the fairy tale ending. You need to brush up on your fairy tales. We're the bad guys. The wicked witch and the big bad wolf. We don't get the happy endings. You've been reading the wrong stories. He kissed her doubts away. In mine. You climb up onto my saddle and we ride off into the sunset. She grinned gently against his lips. You don't ask for much, do you? She murmured. Just everything. We won't settle for less. That's a worse nature. His smile echoed hers, but with a rakish edge. And a witch's too, I'd wager. He eased her off the table and into his arms. He eyed the kitchen floor, then shook his head. No, let's do this right. He took 2 steps and stopped. Alarm flared up in his eyes. You're not going to change your mind halfway through again, are you? Or fling me into a wall? No, she twined her arms around his neck. I swear. All right then. He carried her up the stairs. Only when Roderick had laid her down on his bed did Dorinda feel a stir of trepidation. In spite of his accusations, Dorinda wasn't a virgin. Roderick, however, fell far outside her experience. Human males she could handle. They were almost pathetically easy to manipulate even without her magic. The one vampire she'd gone out with had proved petulant and demanding, not to mention bitey. None of those experiences had provided much satisfaction. As for werewolves, she'd heard the stories mostly from Perry. They included tales of excessive roughness and brutal attacks from the rear with biting and scarring as side effects. She couldn't stop a nervous little shiver when Roderick slid in beside her. I might need protection, she muttered. He sat up, concerned. Are you in heat? No, not that. I'm spelled for that and for diseases. I'm worried about. She waved her hands vaguely, indicating his teeth. I'm not as strong as a female. I'm not sure I can measure up physically. Ah. He kissed her forehead. You'll be fine. I've been with human she's before. I promise to leave you relatively intact. Wait a minute. Relatively. He stopped her with a werewolf's kiss, the tip of his tongue skimming over her lips. From that he slid effortlessly into the human version, lips to lips, tongue teasing hers. He nipped lightly on her lower lip. So far so good, he murmured. She nodded, unwilling to trust her voice. He had a stiff, wiry pelt on his chest, his arms, his back. His back hair yielded to her caresses, but she wanted to feel that chest hair on her skin. She reached for her blouse. Roderick stopped her. He opened the buttons one by one, then nosed the fabric aside and first sniffed, then licked between her breasts. Dorinda couldn't help giggling. Thank heckady her bra had a front clasp. Roderick took his time undoing it. He repeated the process with each breast in turn. Sniff. Get the scent. Then leisurely taste. His warm tongue rasped against her skin, triggering every sensitive nerve, ending it washed over. At this rate she'd be half insane before he even made it to her waist. He was hunting her, she realized, stalking his prey. She ran her hands up and down his back and read the truth of him in his own quivering skin. It was her heart he was after. His own was hers for the taking. Her determination to remain apart wavered before his relentless attack. He'd reached her waist. Sniff. Snuffle. His tongue explored her belly button. Dorinda clutched his butt and pressed him down hard against her hips. The wolf crouched behind his fly, stiff with excitement and eager to leap. She dragged at his waistband, but he stopped her again, capturing her wrists in his hand and pinning her arms over her head. Not so fast, he said against her belly. I waited a long time for this. I intend to savor every second of it. Roderick. Dorinda barely recognized her own voice. It sounded as ragged with hunger as any wolf's growl. Hurry, please. All in good time. Since his one hand was now occupied, he used his teeth as well as his other hand to work her slacks down below her thighs. Her most vulnerable spot lay exposed. The wolf poised over her, then leaned in. Sniff. She shuddered. Lick. She rocked against him, crying out, held by his hand on her wrists and his arm on her chest, and the rough hot tongue that insisted on learning the outs and especially the ins of her. Helpless and reveling in it, her senses exploded in a sudden burst that left her limp. Roderick released her wrists. Are we having fun yet? He asked. Dorinda sighed out a moan. When do I get a turn? The alpha male feeds first. It's tradition. Well, traditions were made to be broken. She fumbled at his fly and reached inside. Now it was his turn to gasp and growl. Following his lead, she didn't withdraw it for a look, but instead indulged herself through touch. Her fingers measured the length of him, prodded his steely hardness, tugged. He made a noise between a growl and croon and closed his teeth on her shoulder. She let go, and so did he. He licked the bitten skin in distracted apology. Roderick, she breathed. I want you and me. All the way. We're getting to that, he said unsteadily. Be patient. She couldn't be patient. She'd kept herself apart too long already. Solitude was not strength. To open herself to another, one whose trust in her and need for her pounded in her soul, there lay the true test of strength. The individual was strongest when acting as part of a whole. She cupped her hands around his face and dropped the last of her shields. The truth of her emotions, herself, passed from her into him like a slide of a fine wine into a goblet. He lurched upright at the contact, but didn't let her go. They'd already enjoyed a casual link, so the shock of her revelation was not as abrupt as it might have been. He rolled with it and came up eager to grasp this new prey in his jaws. What's this? Magic. The heart of the witch. It tastes delightful. You like it? Her surprise quivered between them. Most men run away screaming. This point. Too much honesty. You'll find I'm not some weak skittery ape. What power? It's delicious. It's why we make oaths, and are strict about keeping them. If we let it loose, there's no telling what could happen. I'm not hurting you, am I? Are you joking? Quite the opposite. The wolf charged in for the kill. Somewhere back in the physical world, his hands tore away the rest of her clothing. Hers dragged at his pants until she'd exposed what she wanted most. He surged full tilt against her, physically and otherwise. As he plunged into her, her mind twined about his, bringing both to the happy ending they craved for so long. Afterwards, Dorinda languidly stretched aching muscles and groaned slightly. Through a smile that showed no signs of diminishing, she tugged on her arm. Roderick hitched his body to free it without relinquishing his hold on her. It's still there, he assured her. I wasn't sure. You bite hard. She checked her arm, found it whole, and nodded. She draped it around his neck. So how do I measure up? To what? To wolves. I've never been with a wolf before. Neither have I. She would have sat bolt upright if he hadn't been holding her. She jerked in his arms instead. You what? I've never been with a wolf, Roderick said mildly. Too much risk of the mate bond. Mother considered me more valuable to the pack as unmated and available. Good for trade. His lip lifted briefly. It's what turned me to humans. Well, I wasn't about to stay celibate. No, of course not, she said tartly. It could be worse. Tamara and Diane have to be locked up during their heats. No loose litters in our family. The Queen Mum won't tolerate the competition. Tamara's still virgin as far as I know. That explains her delightful temperament. He grinned down at Dorinda. At least you didn't have that failing. Dorinda giggled. Told you. As long as there are no bats in your past. Just the one, and he couldn't. A lot of them can't. Dead, you know. As I suspected. I just can't understand the human attraction to them. He leaned back with a contented sigh and stretched his full length on the bed, pressing himself comfortably against her. Dorinda climbed half atop him and rubbed her breast against his prickly chest fur. It felt even better on her skin than she had imagined it would. Are you sure I didn't hurt you? She asked. The magic can get a bit rough when it's unleashed like that. Quite sure. He chuckled. That was quite a ride. I can't wait for the next round. If you think you can take it. He bared his teeth and lifted her all the way on top of him. She yipped as his wolf had stirred against her, scenting its favorite prey. Why don't we find out? She didn't notice any difference then. Not during their second romp, nor during dinner, nor at any time during the long serene night she spent happily curled at his side. The noticing came with the morning. Dorinda blinked, her eyes open to soft dawn sunlight and an odd but fully pleasant sensation humming at the bottom of her mind. Like the touch of another's thoughts, only richer, strange and familiar at once. Puzzled, she tried to shut it down. It wouldn't go away. Alarm burst in on her. Could this be another mystic attack? Cautiously she prodded the alien intimate presence. Her probe awoke Roderick. He stretched and yawned and immediately tried to climb on top of her. Good morning to you too, he murmured against her neck. Stop. Don't. Something's not right. He came alert at once, his posture going from passion to protective in one overall tensing of muscles. In the house, he hissed. In me. She shut her eyes briefly, opened them again. She was no longer fully alone in her head. She gathered her defenses and stabbed at the intruder. Roderick yelped. What did you do that for? I didn't do anything. The presence in her head flared up and made itself known with a vengeance. Her hand flew to her mouth. It's you. You're in me. He shook his head as the sting receded. Not yet, but if you'd like, he. Stop. His eyes seemed to turn inward. Unexpectedly he smiled. Well, this is interesting. No, it isn't. It's scary. Any link we had last night should have dissolved. After. You're still there. I think I know what you mean. I feel like someone scratching me at the base of my tail. Rather pleasant, actually. As if, like and bite it, you don't bond. It shouldn't. That's why humans are deemed safe for romps. But then you're not entirely human, are you? Your magic's bridged the gap. I knew it. You. Vice versa. Maybe such a fate wasn't as horrible as she'd first imagined. Not upset. Are you sure there's no wolf in your line? What about your father? Even he used to joke about it. I find it hard to believe that any witch would be satisfied with a mere human. Dad's not a wolf and neither is Mom. This thing between us has to be some little mixed up just now. Made itself at home. How quickly she'd adjusted to it. Frighteningly so. How? Mate bonding? For life. We stay together and raise a litter. That's the. Of course not. You're my mate. We're equals in this. It's up to us together to provide for the pack and keep it strong. If anything, he looked away from. Biologically, genetically there could be problems. Prompted. Roderick mumbled something. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. I said, Uncle Todd married a human. He spat out the words in a rush. Don't. We're proud of. With. Dorinda smirked anyway, right into the face of his glower. And they. Where he became a cowboy. Dorinda's smirk softened into a tender smile. Mother forbade contact, Roderick growled. We've kept in touch through the. To happen to you. Panting. We're mates now. Her, the coyotes, whoever wants to kill me, none of that matters. Whatever comes at us, we'll face it and we'll win. To expel its passengers. Argument. Security didn't even ask to see her passport. Once free of these, their midst and skittered out of her way. The young man in the two-roomy suit had finally found a cart for their bags. With a quivery voice and appeasing smile. Sawyer's Chapter 19. Dorinda had just emerged from the shower when the downstairs phone rang. Roderick picked up. She thought she heard him yelp. A stab of hot rage pierced her through their link before he suppressed it. She cracked the bathroom door. In time to hear. Absolutely not. Who the bloody hell does she think she is? No, I will not. The rest deteriorated into a spate of barks and snarls. marveled that the phone didn't melt in his hand, or shatter when he slammed the receiver down. She started down the steps just as he started up. They met in the middle. Before Dorinda could get a word out, Roderick said, "Mother. She's coming. Here." "Your mother? Here? You mean to Philadelphia?" "I mean here to this house." That was Aunt Letty. Mother arrived at the airport an hour ago. Eugene had to go get her. The Queen Mum insists on an audience now. She'll be here in 20 minutes. Less if Eugene's driving. Dorinda glanced down at the bath towel wrapped around her body. Short notice. She likes to take her prey unawares. We're lucky Aunt Letty was able to slip us a heads up. He herded her back up the stairs. We don't have much time. Dorinda scrambled to keep ahead of him. One stumble and he'd run her down. She knows about me, right? She knows about the death threats, the bodyguard bit, everything. She knew. When I phoned her the other night. Someone's been keeping her apprised. Probably Eugene. Brown-nosing bastard. There you go being paranoid again. Dorinda dropped the towel on a chair and yanked on underwear. Your cousin's checked out. As far as murder goes, this is everyday politics. He pawed through her closet and pulled out her tan slacks and the snug russet pullover with the brocade design. Do you have anything dressier than this? Only the gown you bought me, and that's a bit much for this time of the morning. This will have to do then. He thrust the clothing at her. It had to be. Eugene. He's low rank. I wouldn't put anything past him. She pulled on the slacks and the sweater. She can't know that well, you know. She's aware we've been alone together in the house for several days, that I have had a penchant for human partners, and I've broken the engagement she arranged. She's bright enough to tot up the score on her own. She doesn't know the Duquesnes deceived us, or that Coraline's a coyote, or that you're my mate. When are you planning to spring that on her? The minute she walks through the door. He grinned, and the look was scary to see. He was indeed his mother's son. He tugged at her clothing to get the fit. Just so, then passed her hairbrush. He himself made use of her comb. She'll charge in with fangs bared. We want to look our best for the assault. You expect me to stand by my side where a mate belongs. No warning, eh? See how she likes it. I meant, Dorinda said, do you expect me to use my magic on her if things get ugly? Which is sounding more likely by the minute. That won't be necessary. She's my mother. If anybody's going to rip her throat out, it'll be me. If she'd taken his smile for scary before, she discovered now how far off she'd been. A wolf can only take so much. To cover her misgivings, Dorinda attacked her hair and got it into a semblance of decency. Let's keep the bloodshed to a minimum, huh? I hate having to dish out physical violence before I've had my tea. You haven't met Mother. 5 minutes and you'll be looking for a wall to slam her into. He stiffened. Dorinda got the impression of ears pricking. Seconds later she also picked up the sound of a car in the drive. Eugene, Roderick said. He gave her outfit a final tug, straightened his shirt collar and checked his cuffs and took her arm. She barely had a chance to snatch up her ever-present shoulder bag. Show no fear. She thrives on it. Here we go. They descended the stairs together. Before they reached the door, it swung open. Eugene poked his head inside. Hey, Rod. He spotted Dorinda and lost his watery smile. Like and help us. Rod, shove her, generated by ABC Amber Lit. http://www.processtext.com/upclit html http://www.processtext.com/upclit html. In the closet or something before. There wasn't going to be any before, because the entrance of the rest of the pack cut him off. Dorinda needed no introduction to the she-wolf in the lead. Those were Roderick's eyes boring a hole through her skull, Roderick's mouth twisting up into a snarl of loathing. She was shorter than Dorinda had expected. Her eyes came level with Dorinda's chin. Somehow one missed the lack of height in the face of all that presence, which seemed to expand to take over the room. What's that doing here? Now, Daddy, you promised you'd be nice. Aunt Letty entered in a servile crouch, reduced to subordinate status in her own den. The look she sent Dorinda behind her sister's back was equal parts welcome and apology. This is Dorinda Lowell, Roddy's bodyguard. We told you about her, remember? Letty took another step, then was halted by the rigid line of Bernadette's back. Unnoticed or perhaps ignored, one last wolf slunk in, nearly as tall as Roderick but far more spindly. He had the Chase features but softer. Unfinished. This, Dorinda deduced, would be Roderick's younger brother. She dredged his name out of her memory. Oren. He shot her a glance, then looked down at the carpet. Eugene, equally unnoticed, silently shut the door. The witch, Bernadette said, combining acknowledgement and dismissal in two snap syllables. Dorinda felt her hackles rise. She had no chance to retort because Bernadette had already directed the full force of her attention to her son. Her smile was anything but motherly. Roderick. Roderick stood unbowed.
Insubmissive.
Annoyance flashed in Bernadette's eyes. He returned her smile in kind. Mother, what brings you to America? You know bloody well why I'm here. I went to great lengths to find you a suitable mate. If you think I'll stand by while you cast that aside for some silly little simian chit. That's it, Dorinda thought, and readied her air Geller. Attuned to her emotions, Roderick smoothly stepped in front of her, blocking her spell. I see you've not been fully apprised of the current turn of events, Coraline. Duquesne is far from suitable. I'll leave it to Ellis to explain to you why. As for Dorinda, she is neither simian nor a casual fling. Dorinda is my mate. Every other wolf in the room stopped breathing. Bernadette stood in mounting fury, the rest in mounting panic. Eugene whimpered. Aunt Letty elbowed him sharply. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I could certainly go for a good cup of broth. Dorinda, would you come help me in the kitchen? Dear. Nothing doing. She'd edged out from behind Roderick and had the bitch dead in her sights. Bernadette's yellow glare held enough venom to boil a king cobra alive. Roderick's tension vibrated painfully along her nerves. His emotions, more so than her own, prodded her to attack. On some level, Dorinda recognized this. Another, more primitive level urged her to stand by her mate and strike down the common enemy that threatened them both. Both wars quivered on the verge of shifting. There'd be definite bloodshed between them unless Dorinda struck first. That she'd take a healthy measure of satisfaction from it was purely incidental. Except Letty stepped between them and ruined her aim. Please, Letty said. We're all upset over all that's been happening, and Daddy and Oren have been on a plane for hours. We could do with a minute to catch our breaths. Not with that in the house, Bernadette said. Apes embroiled in our affairs. The idea. Roderick, I've turned a blind eye to your escapades for far too long. The marriage was supposed to fix all that. I suppose a portion of this debacle is my own fault for indulging you. That ends now. We can still salvage this. Get rid of your chew toy. She spat that toward Dorinda. And get Ellis Duquesne in here now. We've got pack matters to resolve. Roderick's lips pulled back. He surged forward. Aunt Letty planted herself firmly in his path. Oh no you don't, she said with a force that surprised both Dorinda and Roderick and caused Bernadette's eyebrows to climb. Eugene whimpered again. Either of you. Not in my house. Daddy dear, why don't you have a seat? You too, Roddy, they're on the sofa. Let me get you something. Dorinda, be a dear and give me a hand in the kitchen, would you? Her look was half order, half entreaty. Bernadette appeared ready to jump at somebody, and Letty was closest. Dorinda touched Roderick's hand, nodded fractionally at the sofa, gathered up her simian dignity and strode into the kitchen with Letty padding at her heels. Bernadette made a comment Dorinda deliberately pretended not to hear. Aunt Letty wasted no time. She shut the door and told Dorinda, I'm so sorry, dear. You have to go. I can handle her. Yes, I'm sure you can. That's the problem. Aunt Letty licked her lips. Daddy can be difficult at the best of times. That's how alphas are. Especially solitary alphas. She wasn't so abrasive when she had Roddy's father to help shoulder the load. She feels she needs to run everything and everyone. Roddy's the same way. Dorinda had to nod at that. So I noticed. They also won't tolerate challenge. Your species doesn't matter. She's recognized a threat. Another alpha. That's why I had to have Eugene bring me. And not Charles. It's a wolf thing. It can be a bit confusing to outsiders. No, I get it. Your sister's a queen bitch who's used to getting her own way. And tromping on everyone else. Well, I don't stand for tromping. That's it. Which thing? Generations of relatives getting burned at the stake will do that. To a person. Roderick needs me. I won't just up and abandon him to that mother of his. You're going to. You have to. This is Roddy's fight. If you involve yourself in this, I'll be ages getting the bloodstains out of the carpet, and Roddy will resent you for the rest of his life because you took away his chance to settle rank with his pack leader. Oh, he'll never show it, of course, but it will be there, eating away at him. You do love him, don't you, dear? Of course, she started and broke off, startled. Of course. It had begun with that first handclasp all the way back at the airport and crept up on her like Springsteen stalking mice in the storeroom. The cards knew what her solitary, secretly lonely soul yearned for, and told her when she'd found him. As usual, it took her forever to catch up with what the deck already knew. She didn't even try to fight her blush. It's that obvious? Aunt Letty smiled and tapped her nose. It is to this old snoot. Oh, I know. Why you came up here and entangled yourself in a war. It wasn't because we were paying you. The sparks that shot between you two. I thought you'd set the drapes on fire. He doesn't want control of the pack, Dorinda said desperately. He said so. Under a truth spell. That's as may be. He does want you, and he's ready to take on his pack leader. To keep you. Let him do it. Let him fight for you and for himself. You can't protect him in this. I can't just walk out on him. I won't. Yes, you can, and you will, better than a wolf could. You can turn your back on a rank fight and it won't destroy you. Humans are resilient that way. We're not. I always felt so sorry for Detty. I know what it cost her running the family. But if she weren't Alpha, she wouldn't be Detty. And Roddy wouldn't be. Roddy. Do you understand, dear? She did. Heckity blast them all to hell and back, she did. She knew what burned in Roderick's heart better than what smoldered in her own. As much as he wanted her at his side, he wanted more to finally settle accounts with his alpha bitch of a mother. If she left him now, she could only guess what he'd think of her. But if she took this chance from him, what would he think of her? Then, voices rose in the parlor, mostly snarls. Letty gestured frantically at the back door. Please, do this for Roddy's sake if not for me. Go now. Promise. I'll call you when it's over. Not without telling Roderick first. Dorinda reached for his mind and hit a seething mass of raw red fury she barely recognized. He fairly roared at her. This was not Roderick, her solicitous mate. This was the wolf poised to attack, primed to kill. She flinched involuntarily from the force of it. What? Even his thought voice had teeth. I'm going, faced with were reality. She had to concede Aunt Letty had a valid point. I'll be back when it's over. Dorinda. She shut her mind against his mental howl and fled. Yes, this was definite. Flight out the kitchen door. By the time Roderick realized her intentions, she got into her car and was backing down the drive. She spotted him rushing after her car with Letty grabbing at his arm. His dumbfounded expression accused her from the rearview mirror as she gunned the gas and put Meadowlands behind her. He was a wolf, she reminded herself. Not a man, no matter what he looked like. She could love the wolf, but she would never try to tame him or break him. For the best, she told herself. Du noir. The painful clenching in her gut, the horrible sensation that maybe she just made the worst mistake of her life, was not so easily left behind. Gone. She'd abandoned him. Run off with her tail between her legs like a gutless omega or a human. She'd fled like panicked prey before the fangs of the pack. He didn't hear a word of whatever Aunt Letty was yipping at him. He only felt Dorinda's agony like shards of glass grinding inside him. She had some silly notion her flight would do him good for some reason. Like he and bite it, she didn't have to fight Bernadette. She need only remain at his side like a proper mate, as any truer would have known. Perhaps he'd had been mistaken. Perhaps she was a monkey after all. Well, Bernadette came up beside him, a self-satisfied sneer on her face. Your little primate's gone and left you. Weak like all her kind. Certainly. Not worthy of you. Eugene's called Ellis Duquesne. He'll be here shortly. You'll forget all about the apes once you have a wolf for a mate. He whirled on her, fangs bared, hair starting to the surface of his skin. Bernadette didn't even blink. She'd ruled the family for longer than his lifetime, and knew bluff from challenge when she saw it. Oh, don't make such a scene. You wouldn't want to. Rip that lovely shirt. She turned her back on him and returned to the house. Aunt Letty, at risk of maiming, put her hand on his arm. Come inside, Roddy, she pleaded. Dorinda will come back. She knows a pack meeting is no place for human. She'll come back to you, I promise. Let's go inside. I've got broth ready. This isn't worth shedding blood over. So you say. He didn't speak aloud. He didn't trust his voice. He allowed his aunt to lead him inside, confident in the now empty pit of his heart that someone was going to die. When Dorinda walked in to set a spell, Perry took one look at her face and let whatever quip she'd been planning die on her tongue. Pico and honey, she said instead, and went to put the kettle on the hot plate. You okay? Not by a long shot. I'm fine. Dorinda plopped her shoulder bag on the counter. They're holding a werewolf summit meeting. No outside species allowed. She shot Perry a significant look. His mother's there. Ooch. The in-laws. Especially if she's behind this. For once she regretted she wasn't a wolf. She could do with a good ripping snarl right now. About sense. I should be with Roderick right now and Hecate take the smug Fleabag. So why aren't you? Was right. I can't fight this battle for him. It would destroy who he is. But, Piffle, you could take her. Probably. That's why Letty insisted I leave. There've been too many deaths. And don't you ever say Piffle again. Specials, entertainment, the works. A Philadelphia block party. Perry gave her a rundown of tentative partners. A couple of customers came in. Kept returning to Meadowlands, and the growing conviction she should return allowed him to claim her. He had announced her as such. She shouldn't have let herself get shunted off like this, no matter how hard Letty pleaded. Philadelphia with murder in mind. Young man with startling green eyes and a bark brown face. Dorinda sat up. Phew. Great. The Hamadryad smiled. His teeth were the color of peeled bark. Dorinda shuffled the cards. I thought you folks could do your own readings. I don't like what the leaves are whispering. I wanted a second opinion. Okay. Cards off the counter. Sorry. That's my personal reading. Let me try again. Up to the end. The Ace of Hearts burst through the black in defiance, but in. Perry had finished up with her customers. She wandered over. How's it going? Here. You shuffle. Dorinda thrust the deck at Perry. If it doesn't work this. It's been telling me the same thing for a week, and I still can't figure it out. The two of clubs came up. She stared at it. Slowly she dealt the next card. This pattern been playing out without her seeing what sat right in front of. Dar. Perry waved her hand in front of Dorinda's eyes. Hello. Roderick. I think I even know why. She jerked her head up, panic in her eyes. Who's Roderick? The Hamadryad said. Dorinda scrambled the deal and shoved the cards toward Perry. Perry'll do your. Determination swept through her. More powerful than the panic. She put her rules. If I try to tip them off, we'll have a bloodbath. She darted out from Meadowlands. If I act fast, I think I can stop it. You want backup? Perry said. Dorinda picked up her weapon of choice. Thanks, but I've got all the magic I. Chapter 20. She drove up to Meadowlands cautiously, like a deer entering a field during gunning season. Big Alex's guards hunched beside the fence across the road, their tails hanging at an uncertain angle. They must have had a run-in with Bernadette. A big Lincoln sat beside Eugene's Buick, shiny and well-kept. Worthy of an alpha. Ellis Duquesne must have answered Bernadette's summons. She wondered grimly if the other player in this drawing-room drama had taken advantage of the situation to invite himself along. With all his victims in one place, how could he resist? She hoped this were true. It would certainly make her job easier. She patted the shoulder bag flopped on the passenger seat. Magical weapon. Check. Personal protection spells. Check. Vow to do no harm. Check that at the door. The sound of her arrival alerted them, as she'd figured it would. Eugene stepped outside just as Dorinda climbed out of her car. He looked anxious. With good reason. You shouldn't be here. The hell I shouldn't. Dorinda slammed the driver's door and circled to the passenger side. She hefted her shoulder bag from the seat and supported it in both hands. Sagged on her arm. Is everybody still alive in there? Yeah, but it's tense. Rod and Bernadette are ready to rip each other's throats out. Having the Duquesne Alpha here isn't helping. Mom keeps putting herself in between, trying to keep hackles down, but sooner or later, hey, did your bag just move? Who else is here? Nobody. Hey, don't She barged right past him and into the house. Nobody, she discovered from her initial glance, was a relative term to a wolf. Bernadette and Roderick stood practically where she'd left them, emotional fangs bared at psychological throats. Ellis also stood, but off to the side, and his stance was neither stiff nor aggressive. He was off his turf in the presence of the pack. He tried to pull a fast one on and not at all happy to be there. Aunt Letty nervously circled the alphas, making quiet little whimpers of appeasement. No one paid her any attention. Eugene whined at Dorinda's back. Rounding out the nobodies were low-rankers Roderick Chase and Cole Duquesne. Cole must have driven Ellis here, acting as beta in Albert's absence. Dorinda nodded grimly to herself. Exactly as she'd figured. Bernadette recovered a split second ahead of Roderick. She cut in front of him. What the bloody hell do you think you're? Dorinda waved her arm. Bernadette was thrust across the room and into Aunt Letty's barculanger.
Sit.
Stay, Dorinda said. Bernadette roared and struggled, but the solid air held her fast. Eugene practically howled in distress. Dorinda edged aside and gestured with her shoulder bag for him to enter the room. He sidled past her and stood well away from her and close to Aunt Letty, who patted his back soothingly. Dorinda's glare burned each wolf in turn. None challenged her. Her eyes hit Roderick last. His grin held an accusatory edge. Welcome back. Although you should never have left. Good thing I did. I know who's trying to kill you. Just one last thing. She turned on Bernadette again. Any problems on your side of the ocean? Any little accidents you can't explain? Bernadette bit at the air, as if she would puncture the spell. Let me loose. You blighted ape. Not just yet. We're all safer with you where you are. You most of all. You're a target too. That stilled her. Explain yourself. I thought this was just about Roderick and the marriage, but it isn't. Never was. It's a lot bigger than that. Dorinda moved until she had the wall at her back and all the wolves in sight. She held her bag against her side, with one hand inside it. You're a pack with a rigid hierarchy. So who benefits if the alphas die? The obvious answer is the lower ranks. 2 packs. 2 sets of dead alphas, 2 chances to move up the ladder. Which gives us 2 connected killers. She noted with no surprise that her suspects had maneuvered to stand together. She'd gotten here just in time. You Cole and you Orrin. The 2 low cards in the deck. Ridiculous, Bernadette snapped. Monkey thinking. We don't. Wolves don't, Dorinda cut her off. But coyotes don't play by wolf rules. Neither do half coyotes. Am I right, Cole? Orrin wouldn't look at her. Cole did. He met her stare dead on, his eyes full of hate. Definitely not Omega Wolf behavior. Come on, Dorinda said. The Duquesne line has coyote in it. That's why they dropped out of the registry. Coraline's half. What's your percentage? I know it's enough to negate your wolf instincts. Using humans to do your dirty work. Buying spells from witches. Thinking outside the box. Enough to make you Alfie's close relative too. What was he, your cousin? Half-brother? No wonder I thought he looked familiar. Bernadette uttered a strangled yelp. Clearly all this was news to her. She turned her fury on Ellis Duquesne. Coraline's what? Not mine, Ellis said hastily. Nora had a litter before I married her. You know how lax those Wissahickon families have gotten. Coraline's mostly wolf. She knows her rank and follows her duties. Unlike some mongrels I can name. With one expertly timed glare he shot all blame and attention at Cole. He started forward. The wicked-looking gun Cole pulled out from under his jacket stopped him dead in his tracks. I doubt if that's the gun that shot Albert, Dorinda said. You wouldn't be that stupid.
No.
We had to ditch that one. Too much chance of Charlie tracing it. Don't worry, this one's loaded with silver-plated bullets and they've all got spells. Owing. They'll even blow you away, witch monkey. I have no doubt, Dorinda said dryly. Her hand moved slightly within her shoulder bag. The bag moved slightly in response. They certainly did a number on Albert. It was you. Ellis's disbelief momentarily overrode his disgust. How could you? Why would you? It should have been you, Cole snapped. You were at the top of the list. That's the trouble with using apes. No sense of smell to speak of. The monkey. We hired mistook Albert for you in the dark. Oh well, miss one problem solve. Another. Albert never liked me. He never trusted my coyote blood. With good reason, Dorinda said. Yeah, how about that? Cole snickered. Just as well we got him out of the way. And what was I? Roderick said. A crime of opportunity? Pretty much, yeah, Cole said. You chases are tough to get at. Too good at watching your backs. Then Oren told me you were headed here alone. Somebody tosses you a bone. You grab it and run. Oren. Bernadette turned on her youngest pup. Oren? You're in league with this beast. You shut up. Oren exploded. His face flushed brick red and sprouted the beginnings of stubble. Defiance of the higher ranks did not come as easily to him as it did to the coyote wolves. Dried up old dam. You don't tell me what to do anymore. Yet, I'm in it. I've been in it from the start. How? There's been no communication beyond my own email, Dorinda said. The internet. I know the Duquesnes have a computer. Saw Cole using it the night Albert was shot. Later Roderick confirmed you had a system at home. Though she spoke to Bernadette, Dorinda kept her eyes on Cole, the obvious brains and backbone of this low-rank rebellion. Chat room, my butt. You were bringing your partner up to speed on the botched assassination. I remember being surprised wolves even used computers. You always struck me as traditionalists. Of course a coyote wouldn't think that way. Coyotes are quick to take advantage of anything. First one in my pack to have an iPod, Cole confirmed. And it's only the old farts who won't adapt to new ways. Ellis doesn't even know what a laptop is. Of course I know what it is, Ellis snapped. It's what you pups use to cook up harebrained schemes like this. And after I took you in and treated me like scat, Cole shot back. I'm lucky you let me sit at the dinner table. You're nicer to the strays in the yard. They get a pat on the head once in a while. It should have been you instead of Albert. Happy now. I'll be happy when your throat's open, Ellis said and started forward again. Cole pointed the gun at him. Ellis froze. Roderick slid a step forward. Oren yipped a warning and Cole shifted aim. Roderick stopped. You can't shoot all of us, Roderick said. No, Cole agreed. Just the ones who matter. Ellis and Bernadette. Maybe you, too. These bullets are spelled like the one that got Albert. A grazes. Enough to kill you. Ask the witch. He's right, Dorinda said. I didn't bring enough cleanser. It would be best if nobody got shot. Her gaze hit Cole. Is that a possibility? Maybe, Cole said slyly. It's leadership of the packs we want along with all territory. If our dear alphas are willing to officially show throat, maybe we can strike an agreement. Submit? To the likes of you. Bernadette's bark dripped derision. You're not even a wolf. Half-breed coyote rubbish. Oren strode over to his mother and smacked her hard across the face. Easy. Enough for him to be brave with his alpha pinned to a chair. Your days are over. He snarled at her. You want to die right now? I'm good with that. If I could get up, I'd be shot in 2 seconds, Dorinda said, and Cole gleefully nodded. That's why I'm not letting you up. We're going to do this without murder if possible. So all you want is control of the packs and the territories, Cole said. It's getting cramped out in Wissahickon. Coyotes breed faster than wolves. Oh, that's another thing. I'm taking Diane as my mate. Oren gets Coraline. He snorted. She probably won't even know the difference. Not Tamra, Roderick said. She is the heir apparent. And a full-on queen bitch like her mother. No thank you. I like my she's young and trainable. So, he addressed the alphas. Do we have a deal? Remember, these terms are not negotiable. Out of the question, Ellis roared. Bernadette's snarl spoke for itself. I get to kill this one, Oren said, inclining his head toward his mother. Fine by me, Cole said. I expected you dogs to be stupid. Actually, I was hoping you'd. His insolence died away. Finally, with Cole's attention split between Bernadette and Ellis, Dorinda was able to reach into her shoulder bag and pull out her own weapon. She let the bag drop to the floor. It landed with a massive plop. Oren and Eugene uttered twin whimpers. Cole just stared. What the hell's that supposed to be? Cole said. This, Dorinda said, shifting Storm and Norman more comfortably into the crook of her arm, is a dragon. Don't let the size fool you. He's the real deal. His Flames hot enough to melt silver bullets and dissolve any little magic you might have on them. Your witch pals don't have anything that can beat dragon fire. I'd put the gun down if I were you. It's a bloody lizard, Oren said. The bloody lizard's backbone spines glowed red. Steam wafted up from his hide. Roderick edged out of the line of fire. I can't control him once he powers up, Dorinda said. And he's in the red zone right now. Put down the gun and you should be okay. Bite my tail, Cole said. You stupid ape. It might be worth a bullet to put you away. Dorinda shrugged delicately so as not to set Norman off. It's your cremation. She prayed he was bluffing. She'd learned to read wolves, but coyotes were too unpredictable. Norman sensed her tension and hissed. His lashing tail thumped against her backside. Cole fired. A single second split into fractions. The bullet left the gun headed for Dorinda. Norman belched a blast of fire. The bullet and its magics were vaporized barely 2 feet from the gun barrel. The flame engulfed the gun. Cole's hand, then Cole. The young were became a bipedal torch. He fell to the floor and rolled frantically. His shrieks went off the scale. Roderick! Dorinda cried. He moved with decisive speed, as if they'd rehearsed. He yanked the Afghan off the back of the sofa and used it to beat at the flames enveloping Cole. They snuffed out with amazing quickness. That was dragon fire, bright and hot as hell but not long-lasting. But then it didn't need to be. Dorinda nudged her bag with her foot. She needed both hands to calm Norman. There's salve in my bag, she said to Roderick. A big tin. I was afraid it would come to this. Someone howled. Eugene? It sounded like his whiny voice. Oren's eyes bulged. In his moon-pale face. Is he alive? Dorinda asked. He's breathing, Roderick said. He caught the tin Dorinda kicked across the floor to him and began to slather salve. Maybe not for long. Ellis, he's your pack. What do we do with him? Ellis had no answer. Events had moved too fast for the old schooler. Somebody call Dr. Clark, Dorinda said. It's daylight, dear, Letty reminded her. Oh, yeah, right. We'll have to get him to Clark's office. I know he has non-vamp assistants. While you're about it, Bernadette said bitingly, do you think you might see fit to let me go? Now that the danger's past and all that. If you don't mind. Oh, sure. Dorinda waved her hand absently. Bernadette stood. She went at once to her younger son and struck him a cruel blow across the face. Oren whined and fell to his knees. He huddled where he landed and whimpered like a pup. Bernadette marched past him as if he no longer existed. She stopped beside Dorinda. Is it over then? She asked. Dorinda ran down the list of players in her head. Should be. We've caught Cole and Oren. Alfie's dead. The witches and the muscle were only hired help. I'd say this pretty much wraps it you. She never saw it coming. For a second she forgot she stood among wolves. They might look like they were human, but they weren't. Her distraction was weakness, and in that moment of weakness Bernadette struck like a snake. Her blow slammed Dorinda into the wall. Her head cracked hard against the plaster. Norman hit the floor. A second later Dorinda joined him. Bernadette stepped over the motionless body of the human on the floor. Now, she said, turning on Roderick, you and I have unfinished business. She'd barely got the words out when Roderick leaped at her. Not an attack. He shoved his mother away and knelt beside his mate. Blood from a cut on her scalp poured across the carpet. Her breathing was thready but her heartbeat firm. Her personal protection spells had deflected the full force of the blow and the broken neck Bernadette had intended. From the corner of his eye, he saw Bernadette wriggle free of her dress and drop to all fours. Though crouched beside Dorinda, he'd angled his body to keep her in sight. Even overwhelmed with concern for his mate, he knew better than to turn his back on his mother. He had no time to shift and match her change. His clothes would hinder him. She knew it too, the bloody bitch. She planned to administer a thorough public drubbing if not dispatch him outright. He heard no mercy in her snarl. In all his life he never had. Bernadette charged him. Roderick scooped up Storm and Norman. The black she-wolf saw her jeopardy too late to stop her leap. Desperately she twisted her body in midair. She landed hard in a tangle of limbs. Before she could scramble up again, Roderick placed Norman on her chest. Don't move, he said coolly. He's rather cross with you just now. Bernadette froze. The dragon's claws clutched her fur. Every spine on his backbone stood erect and glowed a murderous crimson. His sides pulsed in and out like a bellows building up the flame. Roderick stood over her, his hands in his pockets. He does look angry, doesn't he? Probably burn your limbs off if you touched him. You might try your intimidation techniques, but I don't think they're going to work. Bernadette's lips pulled back. Norman was not impressed. Steam boiled off him. In ever-thickening waves, Bernadette's death glared at her through red, unblinking eyes. None of the other wolves moved. No one was going anywhere near the dragon, not after what they'd seen it do to Cole. Abruptly Bernadette shifted. Immediately Norman sank his talons into her flesh. Her bare skin beneath Norman's body darkened to an ugly red. Roderick, get this thing off me now. Do you hear me? Roderick didn't move. I hear you. I've heard every word you've ever said. Bernadette reached a tentative hand toward Norman. Norman hissed. She snatched her hand back away from the heat. Roderick, get off me. You tried to kill my mate, and after she saved us all. She's not your mate. She's a stinking monkey. She's the dragon's mistress, Roderick said. That gives him the right of first crack at you. He brushed hairs from his shirt front. I can wait. Roderick. Her voice rose. Not quite a howl. Not yet a whine. I'm your mother. And you taught me well. She shut her eyes. Her teeth clenched. The reek of burning skin became pronounced. Bernadette lifted her head and turned it, exposing her neck to Roderick. Her body slumped in submission. Her arms and legs trembled in pain. Roderick snagged the Afghan and bundled Norman into it. Hotter than a witch's cauldron, with gouges of Bernadette's flesh trailing from his claws. Step 1 achieved. He had the pack. However, unless he could defuse this. You smell her on me, don't you? Yes, you do. I'll remember that. Finish the wood. He set Norman gently on the floor beside Dorinda. She hadn't stirred, and her Eugene. Twice before he got a grip on it. Roderick waited until he heard Eugene lay in a fetal position, either unconscious or dead. Bernadette. A pile of rags that had been his clothing was scattered on the to get her out of here. Finally, Roderick went to his knees beside Dorinda. She still breathed, but no. Of course not. Ellis backed a step. Be a long time before I consider any further alliance with your pack. Now get